How's it going? And welcome back to Pokemon Unite video here on YouTube. Today, we're going to be going through a tier list of what I feel are some of the best Pokemon you can be playing in solo queue experience right now. When I say solo queue, I'm referring to singles, duos, or trios, any match where you're playing with some amount of random teammates. This tier list does not apply to competitive 5v5 Pokemon Unite, and I'm not going to be covering competitive 5v5 in this video just because I feel like the format hasn't really developed enough to see what top teams are using there and why. That being said, I've played a ton of solos, duos, and trios. I've watched a ton of other great people play solos, duos, and trios, and my thoughts here will be a culmination of the last week or more since we got the new patch along with the new map on what's good and why. Let's go ahead and dive on into our tier list here today. To start with, we've got a couple of offensive Pokemon, both in terms of damage dealing and their power level at the top of our tier list here. Gengar and Glaceon, I think, are the two most powerful characters that can be played in the central area right now. The incredible amounts of burst damage that they output, especially when they get over leveled on the things that they're attacking by coming out of that central area, is just kind of unmatched this patch. They're characters that can carry fights entirely on their own. They're pretty mobile. They have big burst damage. They're everything you want to be doing. Mr. Mime got reworks on two of its attacks in this patch, and it is just an absolute monster. It's pretty rare that I throw a defender or support style character in a really high tier like this, but Mime is just a cut above right now. The amount of stuns that it creates with Power Swap and its Psychic, its Unite move, comes up very frequently on a short timer. It's incredibly durable when it's Power Swapped onto someone. Mr. Mime is a character that make or breaks a lot of the big engagements right now in Pokemon Unite, and your team is much better off when you have one versus not. In the A tier, something to note, there are two things that are a little bit different on the Sky Runes that impact this tier list as a whole. The first is that there's just more experience on the map. So if you're playing well, your Pokemon are going to be hitting their higher level breakpoints faster on the Sky Runes compared to Eos Island. This means a lot of the Pokemon that scale big into the late game are better. Characters such as Greninja, Machamp, Tyranitar, Venusaur, Zarina, these characters that are 3-stage Pokemon that get really big numbers in the late game. They're all better in the Sky Runes than they are on Eos Island. A second type of character, and this is a big part of why Gengar is up here in the S tier that got better, is there's a lot more bushes that provide cover to hide in and attack people from on this island, which makes melee and especially assassin type characters extra deadly in lots of different parts of the map in the Sky Runes, which is one of the reasons why I think Absol and Aegislash are quite excellent right now. Another thing that's different in the Sky Runes is the blue buff no longer provides additional last hitting potential on wild Pokemon. It instead drops the cooldowns of your characters by 20% when you have it. This makes caster characters like Delphox and Espeon that primarily get their damage and utility from their skills a lot more potent. And I think Delphox in particular is really good with that blue buff because it's also the caster style character like this that probably scales the biggest, and it has a lot of mobility with its flame charge to be able to get away from the assassin characters like Gengar and Absol if you play it really well. Mew is the latest addition to Pokemon Unite, and its flexibility is just kind of unsurpassed in the mid to late game. While I don't think Mew is a hard carry quite like Gengar or Glaceon, which is why I don't have it in the S tier category, it's definitely very impactful inside of team fights. Its flexibility to surf people off and away from your points or line up big hyper beams to get lots of damage from really far away make it really a powerful character that's great to have on most teams. As we head down on into the B tier, I think all of these characters are reasonable, but they come up short in some spots or have bad matchups into some of the characters in the top two tiers here. They're all characters that I'm pretty happy to play and pretty happy to have on my teams at given points. I think if you play any of the characters in the B tier well, you're going to have a pretty good time with them. In fact, one of my favorite characters to play in Pokemon Unite in general, Blastoise, is solidly B tier, but definitely a competitive character if you're lining up your Hydro Pumps and your Surfs and you're playing it well and showing up where you need to be. I think The thing that's most noteworthy of the characters in the B tier is that I've got a couple of scaling characters in here, such as Garchomp, for example. And I think Garchomp really struggles into Mr. Mime, for example, because melee characters in general can have a tougher time with Mime with all of these stuns and CC that it provides. And that really stops Garchomp from winding up its boosted auto attacks in a way that lets it cleave through people. As we head down into the C tier, I think these are where the characters that really kind of start to struggle. You have to play pretty exceptionally well with them to get good mileage out of them. And I want to start with talking a little bit about the first one here, Hoopa. Hoopa is a character that's been a very big focal point, especially competitive Pokemon Unite. It's been very good in solos, duos, and trios for a while. I think Hoopa's the worst it's ever been. And they actually didn't even nerf Hoopa directly in this patch, but the change to the Theia Sky Runes on the map has just changed a lot of dynamics that make Hoopa just not quite what it used to be. From things as simple as there's only one berry in the top path, so you have fewer berries for Hoopa's magical trick to steal, to the healing in the base being slower, which means when you hyperspace hole your teammates back, they have to wait a second longer before they return to the fight, which can make or break a lot of engagement. To the fact that there's simply less big 5-on-5 team fights. There's no Dreadnought in the bottom path. That's the objective right first thing to be at. So you don't really get nearly as much value from Hoopa's Unite move as you used to, because you don't need to group up everybody on your team frequently to push an advantage. Even the Rayquaza fight at the very end game is often very chaotic and spread out and involves a lot of skirmishes as opposed to the big 5-on-5s that we're used to in the Zap Pit on Eos Island. Eldegoss and Wigglytuff kind of struggle for that same reason. Eldegoss is one of its big strengths over the years was the fact that it heals everyone around it, and if there's less big 5-on-5 team fights grouping up, Eldegoss's impact as a healer is much less. Same thing with Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff's Unite move is one of the strongest things about its kit, and it impacts the entire team, but if you can't get the team together, it really kind of comes up short for that. Pikachu is probably the least mobile caster character in the game. It has a little bit of stuns in its kit, but there's just so many bushes in the Sky Runes that it's very easy for Pikachu to just kind of get jumped on and not be able to get away. I also think Pikachu scales worse into the late game than characters such as Ninetales and Espeon that fill a similar role but are rated more highly here on my list. Buzzwole and Azumarill are both characters that I think are pretty sweet to play, but they just come up pretty short. Their numbers in general aren't that great. They have poor matchups into Mr. Mime as melee characters, and Azumarill in particular really suffered this patch because they changed how buffs work after you get your Unite move, and Azumarill gets less buffs than it did previous. And one of the things that was really powerful about Azumarill is that it has one of the fastest Unite recharges in the game, but because the buffs are now smaller, your character is less powerful than it would have been pressing that Unite move more frequently in the previous patches. Mamoswine, Crustle, these are characters that have just always kind of struggled in general to really gain traction. I think there could maybe be an argument that Mamoswine could perhaps be up into the B tier because it does scale a little bit better than something like Crustle on this map where there's additional experience, but it's a tough one, and that could kind of go either way. The two characters I have down here in D tier, it kind of breaks my heart to put them there. If you haven't followed my content, Gardevoir and Decidueye are two of the characters I have the most highlights of here on this channel from playing matches on Eos Island, and I think they're just both pretty rotten this patch. They are both incredibly squishy. They have terrible matchups into Gengar and Glaceon and Absol and anything that's going to jump on top of them. And if you look at the S and A tier, that involves a lot of the characters that are up here. There's just so many bushes in this map. It's difficult to have the really good positioning you needed to have to leverage Gardevoir and Decidueye efficiently. In the case of Decidueye, one of the best things about its kit in the previous map, Eos Island, was that Spirit Shackle is really good at contesting last hits on objectives. In the Sky Runes, objectives are just far less important than they used to be. Even losing a last hit on a Rayquaza is no longer lights out. There's still time to catch up. So having this character that has this really powerful last hitting potential is no longer a must-have or high value on your teams. When you combine that with the fact that Decidueye is just going to frequently get jumped on because of all the bushes in this map, it just really leaves a lot to be desired. What'd you think of how I lined things up here? Is there a character that you think I underrated or overrated? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure my experience on the map definitely isn't all encompassing, and if you think I missed on something, I'd love to hear why, so I can make sure to give it a try myself on stream or in a highlight here at some point in the future. As always, thanks for watching all the way through to the end. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to tap that like button, consider sharing it with a friend that enjoys some Pokemon Unite, and I'll see you back here again tomorrow for another character highlight here on YouTube.